Welcome, welcome, everyone. Glad you're here today. Our speaker hardly needs any introduction since she's a regular and beloved by all. Anna's going to talk about a topic that's particularly close to my heart this week, transforming anger. As usual, she'd like to give her thoughts, and then she's reserved about half the meeting for Q&A. If you want to use the chat and have something that you want to ask or you want read out loud, just put read right just before your comment, and we'll make sure to get to that. During the Q&A, if you have a question, you can raise your hand in the screen, or you can use the hand raising emoji or icon over in the reactions, under the reactions button. We're always nice to each other, so I don't need to tell you that. Let's make sure we take courteous turns so everybody gets a chance. I think I covered everything, and I'm in a hurry to get to Anna. So Anna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and thank you to all of you who showed up. It's really lovely to be with you today. I'm going to start with just sharing my screen. Okay. You should be able to see the cat. Yeah, okay, great. So, harnessing anger, navigating triggers, growth, and expression. Yeah, I'm going to narrow it down for you a little bit, and I'm going to start with just telling you a little bit of my own story with anger. But before we do that, I would like to ask you this question. And this is just something for you to reflect on. I suppose this is something that we'll be unpacking during today's session. So if nothing's coming to you immediately, that's fine. You can just sort of sit with that question. But if something is coming to your mind and you'd like to share it in the chat, feel free to do that. I'll just give you a second to read the question. Okay, we have people sharing, great. Okay, I cannot open the chat, lesson learned. And a bit about me. So growing up, I was always told I was an angry kid. I couldn't clearly distinguish between anger and nervousness, so I internalized the labels that others gave me. People can often identify how we present ourselves or how we behave, but rarely do they understand what that presentation is a consequence of, right? And later in life, I realized that anger is not who I am, that in truth, my character and demeanor are quite calm, sometimes too calm for comfort or entertainment of others. I wasn't angry, I was nervous. And I was nervous as a result of instability that surrounded me growing up. And it wasn't even due to social issues like extreme poverty or political unrest. Like it was more nuanced, but just as formative. So nervousness in my case, in the case of my family, was a survival mechanism that was passed down for generations in order to keep us alert, to keep the danger at bay. And the result was that I chronically felt unsafe, so I reacted impulsively. But so did everyone around me. So for a really long time, isolating that cause and effect was difficult, not to say impossible. And when I tried to market vulnerability as a strength within my family, I was acknowledged, but often met with the usual, child, that's not how the world works. And in some ways, I think they were right? Most of us live in a constant state of nervousness. Most of us are afraid for our survival, our dignity, our place. So we relate to one another defensively, often without compassion, because we fear that compassion might somehow weaken our position in the race towards whatever it is that we believe we need to secure. So we are competitive most of the time, I think, because we are scared. So why was anger an important trigger of change in my life? Well, because people kept pointing it out, so much so that I actually became angry about it. That they kept mentioning it because I carried myself differently, because I answered questions differently, mostly because I challenged adults to explain themselves whenever I heard something that didn't make sense to me. And at school, I began to stand out because I didn't follow the same social rules as my peers. And this is where things got really intense. This is where I was first abandoned by a group of friends, where I stopped being acknowledged by others, where I started being called names. And so while preparing this for this session and writing down this short personal introduction for you, I started to think, for however long I've accepted being seen as strange or odd, maybe that's also a reflection of something deeper, right? Maybe that's a sign of the communication gap between the neurotypical and the neurodivergent. Again, that's something that we talk a lot about in this group, how neuronormative people can identify us within seconds and how they instantly decide to treat us differently. And so as neurodivergent individuals, I think we experience the consequences of marginalization from the inside out. We've sort of been forced to confront it. So this combination of vulnerability and anger, anger that stems from a deep sense of injustice, is very much alive. No? But maybe what's different about us is that vulnerability isn't just a value among many, right? Because it's also a tool of survival. It's a language, and maybe most of all, a political stance. But yeah, so knowing how to merge this transformative action, which can sometimes be the consequence of anger, with this soft touch that vulnerability grants us of when and how and who to give voice to, I think this is where we hold the reins. But the reality is that we live in a world that struggles with compassion. We compete for all sorts of reasons, right? Like I mentioned, out of fear, out of excitement, out of boredom, or simply because that's what we were taught to do. So the question I have up there is just something that guided my thinking. You're welcome to share your thoughts in the chat throughout this session, but we won't be focusing on that question specifically right now. There will be time towards the end of discussion with some guided questions. So we've established that what is often diagnosed or perceived as anger may not actually be anger at its root. It might show up as anger, but originate from a place of deep pain, shame, or sadness. That's why I invited you to check in with yourself, right? I asked the question of where's your anger stored today or recently? I asked you to sit with your anger just as if you were sitting with a friend in a cafe ordering breakfast, right? And have a little chat with it. Just the usual questions you would ask a traveler, like where are you coming from? Where you're headed? What's the purpose of your journey? So I'm inviting you to approach your anger without anger, however paradoxical that may sound. And it's not easy. And I know that. To sort of hold it apart from the cultural stigma so often attached to it, this is how you should be, or this is how you shouldn't be, right? So for those of you living in the US, that stigma might sound something like, be always nice, right? And for those of us born in the Eastern Europe, which probably is only me on this call, it might be something like, don't be too happy, right? But it's also important to note, I think, and this is essential, that the solution to anger isn't always happiness, joy, or laughter, right? It can mean and I hope I'll be able to express myself well here, getting more angry. If the ultimate aim is achieving something that requires that sort of energy, like a revolution, for example, right? I'm not trying to radicalize you, it's just an example. But I'm saying this because over time, I've come to realize that anger has been a transformative force in my life, a sort of a propelling mechanism, a one-person rebellion that I had to fight for my own sake, for the sake of learning that there are other ways to dance than just to rave. So anger pushed me to change my circumstances, to question my past, to see who I truly am. It made me ask the uncomfortable questions about topics I was once told to leave alone. It ignited my interest, and ultimately it helped me carve a path towards understanding the intention and purpose behind my emotions. So in many ways, I owe my life to anger. It helped me build a connection with myself that became strong enough that I stopped questioning my own sanity, at least most of the time, or whether I should be someone different or act in a different way. And I thought that that was something really important in my life. And it also helped me see people in better light. And if your trust has ever been broken, you'll know that's no small thing. So anger also helped me to relate to others with more care and compassion. And I've noticed that 98% of the time I get the same thing back. So over the course of many twists and turns, ups and downs, I've come to realize that working with anger requires, first and foremost, a great deal of patience. And ironically, patience is exactly what we tend to lose when we get angry. That's why the most difficult first step is simply wanting to engage with it, to sort of consciously choose a different route, a new paradigm for interacting with your anger. And it's not easy to take a step back and gain an overview of what's really going on. Like in my experience, there are no shortcuts there. Only strong motivation and perhaps the curiosity of what else, how else other than this, how else might I react? What else might this mean? But when you do finally manage to cooperate with your anger, I found that asking these questions, these four sometimes frustrating questions, can actually help unpack the gift of rage. And they are why, what's triggered this, what's my role, am I provoking it, enabling it, or being used by someone else? What for? What else could this emotion be trying to tell me? And what's next? What do I actually want to do about it? And if you prefer metaphors, you can instead ask, where did I just get dropped off? What was the trigger? Did I drive here or was I a passenger? What was my role in this? I really like that one. What's this place trying to teach me? What is the meaning of the situation? And which road do I want to take from here, right? So action. And that one, I really think it's the clue to transforming it from just something we feel to something we can actually act upon. And there are other practices that we can other practices that we can practice. So there's things we can do to deepen this inquiry, right? And plenty of those, I'm sure many of you are already doing. There's the somatic one, right? We can ask, where do I feel this emotion in my body? Like I asked you in the beginning, what does it want me to do? Can I express it through movement, stillness, sound? Is it hot, heavy, buzzing, expansive, constricted? Right, and why this matters. Like, so body often knows before the mind does, right? Somatic awareness anchors the inquiry in the present moment and can help us release stuck patterns. So you're not just thinking about anger, you're in relationship with it in real time. Then there's the creative expression, right? So translating the emotion using any medium of preference. And this kind of creative practice bypasses the analytical mind and gives emotion a channel. It opens up new pathways of meaning and integrates parts of yourself that don't always speak in language. It can also, and I think this is really beautiful when it happens, it can also transform overwhelm into curiosity and even play. Then there's also the dialogical practice, so sort of reflecting on how you might answer these 4 questions on behalf of your inner child, your future self, or even the anger itself. Of course, you can also talk with someone about it. That the dialogical layer reminds us that, you know, self-inquiry doesn't always have to be a solitary act, especially since many emotions, especially anger, originate or are magnified in relationships, right? So bringing them back into a dialogical space allows for reflection, validation, and transformation through connection. And that is because being witnessed is transformative in itself, I think, especially for people who have felt anonymous or invisible for most of their life. It also softens shame and isolation. It honors that some emotions can only heal in connection, right? And speaking to the emotion can also humanize it and build internal compassion. And then there's the archetypal, symbolic, and philosophical. My practice of choice, but yeah, but sometimes it can take you funny places, this one. So there are all sorts of ways you can approach this. Some questions I ask myself sometimes is, what does this emotion say about the kind of world I want to live in? That one can give you really nice information about yourself that perhaps you didn't have before, or you had, and you just needed validating it. How does this feeling reflect my core values or worldview? Is this emotion asking for justice, truth, safety, connection? What would it sound like if it had a voice? What would it look like if it were anything, a weather system, a monster, a creature of sorts? So when you see your anger, not just as your own, but as an archetype, I don't know, it can be anything, right? The warrior, the protector, the boundary setter, you begin to see its purpose. So this sort of philosophical layer lifts emotion from the immediate and personal into something bigger, timeless, and shared. It invites you to not just ask, what am I feeling, but what is this part of the human experience asking of me? So it transforms the emotion from something to control into something to understand, right? And it also connects your experience to the collective narrative sometimes, which can be especially empowering for people whose emotions have been dismissed, marginalized, pathologized. Yeah. And yeah, and now is sort of a bonus closing question. How can I support myself in this moment, right? When emotions feel overwhelming, or when we're caught in this cycle of self-blame, urgency, or collapse, it can be grounding to just pause and ask, if we don't have the patience to sit down with anger, what do I need truly in this moment, right? Not to fix or figure anything out, but just to tend to ourselves. And this may take the form of asking, do I need silence or a song? movement or stillness? Am I hungry, tired, touched out, overstimulated? Do I need to cry, to shake, to rest, to say no, to say yes? Would it help to put a hand on my chest? Would it help to go out to ask for help? Would it help to be alone? Would it help to be in the presence of someone? So the way I see this, it could be something that we add to our practice of sitting down with anger, or when we don't have the patience, time, and mind to try to sort of unpack what our anger may mean, we can just go straight to that. Because this way we're sort of securing a space for ourselves to just feel safe and comfortable with what's going on in that moment. And we take care of ourselves. And very often we find out that much of what we're feeling is in fact an effect of the external environment, and not maybe something that we've been carrying or harboring within for a really long time. I'm saying most of the time because there is anger that lives in us, and that's a different kind of a creature. But for situations where you just feel a sudden overwhelm, I find this question to be really helpful. Okay, I went through this really fast. Yeah, so the rest of the session is reserved for discussion. Would anyone like to share their thoughts or reflections on what I've shared so far before we move on to the guiding questions? I have quite a lot of guiding questions for you, but if there's anything you'd like to share before, feel free.
I just wanted to say that that was so beautiful. I love that you bring the primal aspect into it. Years ago, I volunteer taught women and children survivors of domestic abuse, and they were terrified of moving. Like they were afraid to move, literally move through their anger, and because they didn't trust themselves. But then once they started moving, they realized that there was this archaic blueprint that was there for millions of years that knew how to move, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. So yeah, thank you for bringing the primal into that. Yeah, so that's all I have.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, I don't think we can really talk about anger without mentioning that, right? Because it's such a primal emotion also. And yeah, like I said, I think a one that tells us plenty about where we are and what we want and what we're trying to see in the world or in people. And yeah, our body usually knows way before, but it takes some practice or some awareness to sort of hear it or feel it or give it space to try to demonstrate to us what it might be experiencing. Okay, I think I'm going to move to the guiding questions because there's quite a few of them I have. I just any that resonates with you. I thought I would divide them into those. Sorry, my cats are crazy. Into those four categories. But I think that, you know, whichever one of those just sort of speaks to you, they relate to one another. I mean, if we're talking about personal relationship with anger, we have to touch on triggers and tensions also. Yeah, just something that came to me when I was preparing this session. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted today. I don't know why. But yeah, the one that really speaks to me is the last one. And today I thought to myself that I'm really smart to ask these questions, but I probably would not be able to answer that last one. That what boundary is asking to be named or reasserted in your life? So I would definitely be thinking about this one after this session. Would anyone like to share anything?
Yeah, no, there is a question in the chat. Hold on, it just disappeared on me. Oh, someone's asking, how do I release internalized anger?
Well, let me just get back. Either one, I mean, I would say one of those. Whatever works for you. I mean, drawing, moving, asking yourself these questions, sitting down with someone, going for a walk, hugging a tree. I mean, just, I think there is no one solution to this, you know. It also takes knowing the self a bit and knowing what usually puts us in a state of calm. And that's not necessarily so that the feeling passes, it's just so that we have the energy and the space to ask these questions, right? And we create for ourselves this moment where we can be vulnerable and we don't feel judged, and we can then practice rerouting our reactions slightly so that we don't follow always that same paradigm. But what that is, I don't think there is one thing that works for everyone. I think that takes experience, experiencing many of them and seeing where they take us. So I would say, you know, any of those, and also these questions, even just one of those. I think what I find is even asking one of those helps me to, if I don't immediately get an answer, at least I don't take myself as seriously anymore. I'm not so focused on my anger anymore. I manage to sort of take a step back and think, okay, Anna, so this thing really pissed you off. Well, let's just have a think why that might be. And that question alone helps me to just sort of soften the stance and not project such an intense, in my mind, it's solidified, but I don't know, just I see it as a kind of solidified energy. Yeah, it disperses it essentially. But yeah, it takes dancing. You gotta dance with yourself and see which moves you like. And Dawn have their hands raised, I think.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm thinking about the top left quadrant. And I'm sure plenty of other people on this call will be able to relate to this, but growing up in a household where it was completely inappropriate to show any anger because you have to read all of the Emily Post books for those who know that there's social requirements, and then having many decades of not knowing what to do with that. And yeah, so still struggling with that at the age of 50, though I am completely aware that it is totally appropriate to show one's emotions, but the vulnerability is definitely still challenging.
Thanks. Yeah, that was my household too. Only, like I said, we were all so angry. It was really difficult to even notice, you know, what was the beginning, what was the end of that anger, and who was the initiator, and yeah, just the kind of environment, I suppose. So learning that anger is actually not my trait, it's not something I identify with, was shocking at first. Yeah. Dawn, you want to share something?
Yeah, like so many of us, issues of justice revolving around justice make me angry quicker than anything. But when I do get mad for myself, or when I used to get mad for myself, it was when I felt like I was at someone's mercy, because I grew up in a really abusive, angry household. And then I started to realize over years that I was not always good at determining when I was at someone's mercy. And in fact, I'm rarely at someone's mercy, at the end of the day. I mean, it happens, I've been involved in things where that was the case, but it's rare. And so figuring that out particularly has helped me make friends with my anger and slow down a little bit.
Yeah. It's the control, isn't it? That's something that resurfaces for me now and again. The feeling of always needing to be in control and always feeling, not always feeling, but sometimes feeling that I'm losing that control to someone or something else. That this one is big. This one is big because I also often ask myself if maybe I would like to be in a situation where I'm at someone's mercy, and maybe I'm projecting that, but maybe I'm going too deep into that. Sometimes it's a sort of like the responsibility being taken off of us for just a moment, and then we can blame others other than ourselves. But that's something that definitely resurfaces for me in my life. I'm gonna try to open the chat. It will share on the screen, but I see there's so many messages here. Okay. I don't know what 5% meant. I'm really curious now.
I should also add, if you want your comment read, just type in read and then the comment, and then we'll make sure that one of us reads it out loud. A couple hands up. Let's see here. Have their hands up. You want to go first?
Sure. Sorry if you said this already and I missed it. I was on the subway at various points underground. But I guess I'm wondering if you have advice on how to either harness anger or discharge it harmlessly. I have a feeling that a lot of the stuckness I experience in my life is due to like internalizing anger as shame, and that's not working for me.
Well, I suppose that would depend on your intention, right? I mean, you have to decide whether you want to harness it or you want to let it go, right? Because the choice is there and it's yours to make, and there are so many different ways this could be transformed into something else. But whether you see that shame, that feeling of shame that you hold right now could translate into another feeling or and another story that you'll write, or whether it's something that you simply want to rid yourself of. And maybe rid yourself off is not the right choice of word, but to just sort of find an escape route for in your life that depends on the relationship that you have with that shame, I think, and the role it has, whether it's something that is important to your life, in your life for some reason. We often hold on to these feelings because they help us create the kind of identity that we have for the time being, and it's counterintuitive, and it's not exactly serving us, and it's not something we feel comfortable with. But very often we need these negative feelings to sort of help us breathe into reality, the kind of version of ourselves that we have in our mind. Oftentimes that is a result of the kind of environment that we grew up in, or just the sort of experiences that happened to us in our lifetime. So I suppose I would ask, what do I need this shame for? What is the purpose of this shame in my life? I mean, unpack the gift. Just imagine it as a gift. That's what I do. I always like to imagine it as a gift, whatever that might be, and close my eyes and unpack it and see what's there, because most of the time when we hold on to something, it's because we need it for some reason, some really odd reason that we would never think could be true. And then the choice of whether to work with it or find it as something that is not really serving you in your life anymore, well, that choice will be yours to make. Yeah, I'm afraid that's all I can say. That's all that's coming to me right now.
Can I just build on that with a couple of things? Because I was thinking about anger and its comparison to other maybe feelings or sensations we experience as human beings. Like for instance, when you experience hot, cold, or even like pain, these are, it's almost like a what is it, some kind of a gauge. Your body is detecting something, and it's trying to, there's something out there, something happening that is possibly like very aversive. So you can try to just deal with the discomfort or the pain, but if you don't know how to interpret it, then that's, you can't ever maybe address the underlying sort of driver of it. So, the fact that one may be frequently feel angry, there's ways to just sort of live with feeling angry a lot. But then it's this deeper question, like this reframing and reclaiming, like how might your anger be trying to protect or guide you? Like, I find that is like a very helpful question. I mean, it's, obviously there, it sounds like a simple question, but it takes, some people don't know the answer their entire lives. But I think that, there is something to that, there's a reason why we feel or experience these things. And it's worth sort of reframing so that you can kind of reclaim it and use it potentially to your well-being.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roger.
Right. Sorry, do you want to go next?
Sorry, trying to unmute in the wrong place. I've been having a lot of trouble with being angry over the injustice going on in the world around us. And I've been working with the equation that says anger equals energy, and energy plus action equals power. And that what I need to do with my anger is claim my power by finding something to do, something tangible about the situation. Can I write a congressman? Can I be a volunteer someplace? Can I just talk to a friend about what's making me angry, but to not keep it in the powerless state it makes me feel, but instead trying to use it as a source of empowerment by acting with that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is precisely what I meant when I said that sometimes the solution to anger isn't, getting rid of it, but sort of getting even angrier if it's meant to serve a purpose, if we're trying to build a momentum. Yeah, sometimes anger is, building that critical mass that is necessary for us to be able to enforce the kind of changes we seek collectively. So sitting with another person as the dialogic practice in this respect not only helps us to sort of relieve the access of that emotion, but to build a connection that can be vital to enacting the kind of changes that we're seeking. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's something I wanted to talk about today.
Just want to read a comment here. Asks, how do you reconcile self-compassion for the person who is angry and accountability toward the people they may hurt when they are angry?
How do I reconcile self-compassion for the people who are angry and the well, can I say whatever works for you. I mean, I like to believe that the purpose of us all being here is to experience, and you know, maybe all of this is just an illusion. I don't know if this is my way to look at it, but I guess here we're calling onto something different, maybe a kind of a belief system, a faith that you have in life. Whatever works for you. You don't have to. I feel like you also don't always have to feel compassion towards those that cause others harm. You really don't have to feel compassion for them. You have to feel compassion for yourself and for those that you care about. If that anger is something that's just too heavy to carry, then you search, I suppose, for ways that, you know, you can relieve yourself of that burden. You can relieve yourself of the burden of thinking about that person all the time. And, you know, when you catch yourself spending more time focusing on the kind of, you know, I'm losing words today. Focusing on the reason you're angry rather than thinking of how you can transform that anger. That's actually something that we are being very often sort of manipulated into doing, right? Especially in the media, right? Paying too much attention to what's supposed to make us angry and too little to what we can do with that anger. So this is, I suppose, the best answer I can come up with. If it's something that's just too heavy, then try to explain it to yourself. I mean, the way I explain it to myself is that we're all learning and wish that person the best for the future. And if that's not something you want to do, or you don't feel that the situation is adequate, you know, if it's not something that can qualify as just an experience, but that person should know better at that time, or they carry a burden of responsibility, then there is no reason for you to feel compassion for that person. And that's also fine, as long as you don't, you know, I think ultimately the point is that you don't feel bad about yourself. So I think that's what it is. I mean, I hope this answers this. These questions are great, but they're challenging me. Okay, 2 more people that have.
You want to go?
Sure. I think I just wanted to, not like a question, but more like, I feel like the topic of this, I don't know what this is called, this thing that we do, these courses that you have, these workshops, but it cannot be like understated the value of it, because especially within our community where we are more prone to abuse, we are more prone to trauma, where you know, we've been gaslit, and especially if we've not been diagnosed, late diagnosed, we don't have that understanding, and so we're like more likely to be victims. And this is so important, because I think, at least as part of my healing journey, I internalized anger a lot, and I kind of turned it in on myself. And I think there's like 2 aspects to anger, right? There's the grief under anger, there's anger, and some people are more comfortable um, with the feeling of power that comes with being angry, right? It's a more activating energy. And then there's some people who are more comfortable with the kind of passivity of grief. And I think both need to be seen, and you have to determine individually which one maybe you struggle more with. And I think for me, it was difficult for me to be angry, and it was more, and really, anger is very tied to your power. And it's really about power. We've been, in positions where we've been victimized, where other people have had power over us, where we don't even have a lot of power within our own bodies, right? Or understanding of what's been going on in our bodies. So I just think like this whole conversation and this topic should be so much more widespread and like such a bigger part of the conversation, because it's so intrinsic. It's like really fundamental to us feeling like we can have a seat at the table, like us feeling like more empowered, just like more at baseline with neurotypicals and stuff like that, because um, there's so much work in a way, like we're operating at a deficit in so many aspects. And I think that there's so much talk now about autism, and not to minimize the disabling effects of it, because I actually feel like it's very disabling in so many ways. But I think that while focusing on that, we don't focus on the parts where maybe that it's not all about just being neurodivergent, and a lot of it is the trauma really surrounding it. And I think if we don't focus on the trauma part, we're actually victimizing ourselves further. We're disempowering ourselves further, because we're probably not as disabled as we have to be. And it's not just in the ways that people talk about it diagnostically. It's really in these ways where we don't feel like we can speak up, or we don't feel like, oh, this is normal, or we feel like the burden of feeling compassion or empathy is on us because we're capable of it. And or we don't really have an understanding of what's normal and healthy because we haven't experienced that, right? And then because we're different, I think it's even harder for us, because we don't we feel more confused about that line. So I know I'm going in a lot of different directions, but just like big picture wise, I think it's just really fundamentally so important what we're talking about here, because this is what's going to allow us to be empowered. And this is also, I think so much of our disability in ways, again, is the trauma. And part of that is coming into our power, right? Coming into our wholeness, coming into whatever. And, in an ideal world, the being neurodivergent is not going to be quite so disabling. And I think, and I feel like we can get there. I just think so much of it about it is about kind of getting to a point of being fed up and being like, this is fucking ridiculous, and getting mad, and getting mad about being victims, getting mad about being traumatized. And there's our individual personal trauma, and then there's the collective trauma of our community, right? But what you can, I think, individually is really the place where you start, right? And that's the place where you start getting fed up. And I think when you start getting fed up and you start getting angry and you start being able to deal with that in a healthy way, that's where things can start to shift for you on an individual level, and then as a community, it can kind of ripple out, right?
Thank you so much. You should be hosting this session. Consider
Hosting a session. So many you mentioned.
here. And yeah, and one of my favorite works ever is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, a book that changed my life completely. And a book that made me realize that the first step in any kind of transformation is acknowledging the fact that we've been oppressed, and sort of, moving away from the only path known to oppressed people, which is to follow in the steps of their oppressors. This is such a huge step for anyone who's been traumatized, and that's been most of us in some ways, in different ways. So yeah, everything that you said here, and also the relationship of anger and power, and how the kind of message we're getting is that dominance means violence, and this is just how we're supposed to protect ourselves if we want to secure a space for ourselves to survive in this world. So yeah, thank you.
I have to,
Jump
Thank you.
to
Can you just put the name of the book, by the way, in the chat whenever you get a chance, that you were talking about?
Yeah, sure.
I'll put
Thank
it.
you.
I have to jump to another meeting. I just want to say I want a tattoo of everything just said on my whole, it would take my whole body, but it would be worth it. It was such a perfect thing to say. Thank you, thank you. I think there's so much pressure too, going off Anna, so much pressure to forgive, which is such a weird concept. Like, as someone who worked with primates for years, if you're in a tribal group, everyone compromises for the good of everyone. Like, there's no victimization and then separation and then forgiveness, which is such an abstract idea. So yeah, I have to go, but this is so wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Don.
All right, I have to jump off as well, but then why don't you go next? And Anna, are you okay with closing out the session?
Sure, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of that. And you talked about at the beginning how anger kind of helped you to like change your life and like showed you where you needed to make changes. And I kind of feel the same way. One of the questions was asking about like what kind of situations trigger you or trigger anger in you. And for me, there's like a multitude of them, but being misunderstood, or feeling like I'm not being heard, or any kind of like unfairness, injustice, or feeling like I'm being taken advantage of, can all be things that trigger me. But my initial response is to like not express that anger, because I think I've learned so much over time that it's wrong and it's bad and I shouldn't express anger. And then eventually I end up exploding because the anger's not going anywhere. Like, if I don't address whatever it is that's angering me, it doesn't go away, and then it just gets stronger and stronger. But I think something that I've realized more recently, thanks to therapy, is that like I think what my anger is really trying to show me is kind of like what you said. Like, it's trying to guide me away from situations, relationships, and people who aren't trying to hear what I'm angry about. You know, like I think a lot of times I've been made to feel like my anger is a bad and negative thing, when in reality, I think when I take a look at the situation and the person who's making me feel that my anger is a bad thing, because honestly, I feel like there have been times where I have expressed my anger in pretty healthy ways, you know, like I'm angry, but like I'm not, you know, going crazy. And regardless of how I express the anger, it's always people have always made me feel like it's wrong. And I think what I've started to realize more and more is that it's because those people aren't really mad that I'm angry or upset that I'm angry. They're upset that I'm insisting that they meet these needs that aren't being met, and they don't want to meet them. And I continue to allow people to do that when my anger is trying to show me that, hey, this person, this situation, they're not for you, because they're not interested in understanding why you're angry and fixing that or meeting that need. They would rather just tell you to like stop being angry. So I think recently I've had to learn more and more that like, and it's hard because I know myself personally, I struggle a lot with like, I don't want people to not like me. I don't, you know, I don't want to feel alone. I don't want to end up with no friends. I don't want to end up with no partner. Like, so I have a tendency to cling to people even when I know it's not good. And I think my anger is constantly trying to show me like, okay, this isn't it, because this person can't hear what you're angry about and isn't concerned about fixing it. You know, they're not interested in meeting those unmet needs that you're angry about. You know, the things that are making you angry, they're valid. And you know, these people or this situation isn't for you. So that's my little piece.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the time, this is the reaction that we receive when we voice our anger. No, this is either something that this is something you've imagined, or this has not happened, or from my perspective, it looks different. What we're getting essentially is, I'm not interested in meeting you halfway. I'm not interested in hearing you out. Like you said, I'm not interested in meeting your needs. I'm not interested in potentially working on that communication so that we're both happy, right? And I feel this is probably the biggest issue, you know, for most people. But I do see anger as a kind of a self-navigating system that helps you stay true to yourself. We can say it's intuitive or not. I mean, it depends if, you know, if that's something that resonates with you. I was never, I'm going to put it that way, I was never disappointed whenever I chose to listen to my anger, because it always provided an incredible insight. So, so this is why this is why this session today. And I did feel for a really long time guilty for being angry whilst I was being angry, and also a long time after, when I was working through a certain situation and that our anger sort of resurfaced for me. And I would ask myself, like, okay, why is this still making me angry? Why is it even making me angry when maybe there's another emotion that would be more appropriate here? And the logical mind trying to kick in and trying to tell you what you should be feeling. Yeah, so it's a long process, like I said, and one that requires patience, and lots of things are going to resurface. Another thing that can resurface for you is, you know, the way you also demonstrate anger, the way, you know, the kind of thing that anger does to your body and your mind, and who you are when you become angry. Maybe that's also something that will at some point, become important to you as you work with your anger. It certainly did for me. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else that would like to share? I do apologize to those of you who were not able to connect on time. I know that a part of this session was lost. I do apologize for myself feeling very oddly distracted today. I'm struggling for some reason to just to speak, but sometimes I have those days. Roger always shares these sessions online. So for those of you who were not able to see the first part of it, you'll be able to see it on YouTube. Yeah, and if there is nothing more, then yeah, I would like to thank you for joining. And yeah, lots of luck with working with your anger, lots of patience, and lots of compassion and love for yourself. Yeah, someone has their hand up.
Would you like to? Yeah. Yes, thank you. I unfortunately missed most of the meeting. I was very much looking forward to it. I've invited quite a few people. Some are here. Thank you for offering it. I was very glad to find your group. The little that I've caught and what I've read in the chat area, I'm wondering, are you educating anyone here on the laws available to them?
On the laws available to them?
Yes, abuse. I'm not sure I understand. There are laws available to individuals who are abuse victims, targets, and survivors. And what I'm hearing here mostly is, I guess, of course, the topic is anger in a certain human group, but I'm wondering if you are also sharing with them not only whatever. Again, I'm sorry that I did miss the event, but whatever you've offered in regard to coping, learning how to cope and reconcile and reason with yourself and others and so on, I'm wondering if you're also offering those individuals the basics of the laws available to them. Thank you.
I'm an academic researcher, is not based in US. No, I don't have information of the kind of means of help that are available to you wherever you are right now. But if you would like that to be shared, you can ask that on the Facebook group, and there's plenty of people that are trauma counselors there that will be able to provide you with that kind of information. What I'm sharing here is just a practice that I have been engaging in myself as a result of my own trauma. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, and I will see you during some other session. Probably of someone else. But like I said, if you would consider hosting a follow-up session, I think that would be great. You had plenty to say that I think resonated with a lot of us. Or anyone else really, because it's not, it's such a collective topic. Yeah, all the best to everyone. Bye-bye.